Imagine a child who never cries, never laughs, never shows the slightest flicker of emotion, as if every feeling has been quietly switched off inside their mind. Parents think it's just a phase. Teachers assume the child is shy. But something else is happening, something no one can explain. Late at night, when the house is silent and the world is asleep, this child often sits upright in bed with eyes wide open, staring at something no one else can see. They don't blink, they don't flinch. They simply watch, as if waiting for an invisible presence to come closer. Psychologists call it detachment. But what if it isn't detachment at all? What if the child is reacting to something real, something adults can't detect? The more the parents try to understand, the stranger the behavior becomes. Drawings of shadowy figures no one recognizes, whispered conversations with someone who never answers back, and a coldness in their voice that doesn't match their age. And every morning, the child remembers nothing, not a single moment, not a single detail, as if the night belongs to someone else entirely. One evening, the child begins sketching again, but this time the drawings are far more disturbing. Instead of vague shapes or childish symbols, the paper shows a tall figure standing at the edge of the child's bed, its limbs long and unnatural, its face blank like a wiped slate. The parents assume it's imagination, maybe something the kid saw in a cartoon, but the child insists they've never seen anything like it before. "It comes when the lights go out," the child whispers without lifting their eyes from the paper. The pencil scratches faster, harsher, almost as if the child is racing against something approaching. When the parents try to take the paper away, the child clutches it tightly with a strength far beyond their small frame. Their breathing becomes shallow, their bodies stiff, and for a moment their voice changes, deeper, colder, almost echoing. The room temperature drops. A soft thud echoes from the hallway, though no one is there. The parents feel a growing dread creeping through the air, the kind of dread that doesn't come from imagination, but from instinct, screaming that something is terribly wrong. The next morning, the parents notice something even more unsettling. The drawing they tried to take away is gone. Not ripped, not thrown, not hidden, just gone, as if it vanished during the night. They search the child's room, the trash, the cupboards, even under the furniture. Nothing. When asked, the child simply shrugs and says, "He took it back." A chill runs down the mother's spine. She asks who "he" is, but the child doesn't answer. Instead, they turn toward the dark corner of the room and smile faintly, a smile that does not belong on a child's face. Later that day at school, the teachers notice the child staring at the classroom door for unusually long periods, as if expecting someone or something to walk in. During recess, the child avoids sunlight entirely, sitting alone under the shade with their back rigid and unmoving. When another kid tries to talk to them, the child's pupils dilate unnaturally, and they whisper, "He's coming for you too." No one understands what that means. But by evening, the child's teacher reports seeing a tall silhouette outside the classroom window. That night, as the parents prepare for bed, they hear strange tapping sounds coming from the child's room, slow, rhythmic, almost like a coded message. They rush to check, but when they open the door, the child is fast asleep. The tapping stops instantly. The moonlight creeps through the window, casting shadows that shift as if alive. The father steps closer, only to notice thin black lines drawn on the wall that weren't there during the day. They look like symbols, circles, triangles, slashes, arranged in a pattern that feels deliberate, intentional, almost like a warning. The child suddenly twitches in their sleep, whispering words in a language the parents have never heard. The mother shakes the child gently, but the whispering grows louder, as if coming from behind the walls rather than the child. When the child finally wakes, their eyes are bloodshot and unfocused, and they murmur, "He's getting closer. You shouldn't have erased his mark." The parents freeze. They never touched the symbols, but someone or something clearly believes they did, and the tapping begins again, this time on the window. The next day, the parents decide to record everything, hoping to catch whatever is causing these disturbances. They place a camera in the child's room, point it at the bed, and leave it running through the night. The following morning, they sit together to review the footage. At first, everything appears normal. The child sleeping, the curtains swaying slightly, the usual nighttime stillness. But exactly at 3:12 a.m., the camera glitches. The screen distorts into static for 3 seconds, and when the image returns, something is different. The child is no longer lying down. They are sitting upright, perfectly still, staring directly into the lens with eyes wide open, glowing faintly as if reflecting a light source that doesn't exist. Their mouth opens slowly, but the audio remains silent. Then, behind the child, a tall shadow leans forward, long, thin fingers stretching toward the bed. Before the shape fully appears, the camera cuts off entirely. The parents check the room immediately, but the child is sleeping peacefully, unaware. The only sign of the night's event is a black handprint on the wall behind the bed. But the real terror began the night I found the drawings. Not the ones taped carefully to the refrigerator door, the neat crayons, the bright colors, the smiling suns, but the ones he hid behind the bookshelf, folded so tightly they left creases like bones crushed under pressure. Each sheet showed the same chilling scene. A child standing alone in a room with no windows, no doors, only a tall shadow kneeling beside him. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary imaginary friend, the kind kids invent to feel less lonely. But the more I stared, the more wrong it felt, because the shadow's shape wasn't human. Its arms were too long, its head tilted too sharply, and the child in the picture always had a terrified expression, eyes bulging as if silently screaming. I remember calling his name softly, my throat dry, my heartbeat shaking my ribs. He appeared in the doorway and whispered, "He told me not to show you these." When I asked who he was, my son simply pointed behind me, to an empty corner of the room. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The soft clicking of the ceiling fan, the faint hum of the refrigerator, even the distant barking of a dog miles away. But worst of all was the gentle movement of tiny footsteps outside my door, stopping, waiting, then walking away again. By morning I had convinced myself it was just my imagination, paranoia fueled by exhaustion. Yet when I entered my son's room, a coldness hit me so violently I stumbled backward. The window was open, curtains twisting in the wind like living things, and all his toys were lined up facing the closet, as if waiting for something to emerge. He sat in the middle of the floor, knees pulled to his chest, murmuring quietly. I knelt beside him and listened. At first it sounded like nonsense, broken phrases, half words, but soon I realized they were instructions, whispered repeatedly like he was rehearsing them. Don't look at him in the dark. Don't let him touch the walls. Don't breathe too loud. And then he looked at me and said, "He's angry you found the pictures." I tried to rationalize everything, stress, nightmares, behavioral anxiety. But deep down something told me this wasn't ordinary. Kids imagine things, yes, but not with such specific rules, not with such fear carved into every word. So I decided to observe him closely. The next evening I watched quietly from the hallway as he played alone. At first it seemed normal. He moved his toy cars, whispered stories, traced patterns on the carpet. But then he paused, tilted his head sharply to the left and whispered, "Okay, I won't tell." He scooted slightly aside, leaving space for something invisible, and continued playing, but now with hesitation, like he was being guided or corrected. Then suddenly he reached out and grabbed the air with both hands, as if stopping something from coming closer. His breathing quickened. He said, "No, not while he's awake," clearly referring to me. I stepped inside the room, and the moment he saw me, he froze. His eyes widened with a terror I'd never seen in a child before. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said slowly, voice trembling. Now he's going to hide better. That sentence clung to my mind like a parasite. Now he's going to hide better. Because hiding meant he was already here, somewhere in our house, in places where shadows gathered naturally, blending in, watching. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. Small objects disappeared, only to reappear in odd places. A spoon under the couch, keys inside a shoe, a toy buried under folded towels. Lights flickered exactly when my son entered or left a room. Doors creaked without wind. But the worst was the whispering. It wasn't loud enough to form words, but it had a rhythm, a pacing, as if someone or something was trying to speak but didn't know how. Meanwhile, my son grew quieter. He stopped eating at the table and preferred sitting on the floor in corners. He avoided mirrors, refused to sleep in his bed, and spent hours staring at the ceiling with a blank expression. Whenever I asked what was wrong, he only repeated the same line. He's learning how to stay hidden from you. And the way he said it, calm, matter of fact, made my blood run cold. The final proof came unexpectedly. I was reviewing old home videos on my phone, looking for signs, clues, anything. Most clips were harmless: birthday candles, messy art projects, laughing fits. But then I opened one recorded months before all this started. The video showed my son playing near the living room wall. As he stacked blocks, he suddenly looked at something behind the camera and smiled. Not the innocent smile of a child, but a slow, knowing grin. "He's here," he whispered. Confused, I paused the video and listened again, but this time I increased the volume. And that's when I heard it. A faint exhale right next to the microphone, like someone leaning close enough to breathe onto the lens. I felt my stomach drop. I replayed it 10 times, hoping it was just interference, an audio glitch, anything logical. But the sound was too deliberate, too human, yet not human enough. My hands trembled as I closed the video. If he had been there months ago, then he hadn't come. He had been waiting, watching, growing patient. And now my son knew the rules, but I didn't. I finally decided to confront my son, not with anger, not with fear, but with the desperation of a parent who knows something is deeply wrong. I sat beside him on the floor as he traced circles with his finger, each loop tighter than the last. "I need you to tell me the truth," I said quietly. "Who is he?" My son didn't look up. "You won't believe me," he murmured, voice hollow. "Grown-ups never do. That's why he likes children more." My chest tightened. "Why?" He paused, and for the first time in days, he raised his eyes. They weren't frightened. They were exhausted, like he had been carrying a secret far too heavy for any child. "Because children don't pretend they're not scared," he said. "He likes fear that's honest." I didn't know what to say. He leaned closer, whispering, "He follows you too. You just don't notice him because he doesn't want you to." The air around us felt dense, thick, as if invisible hands were pressing against the walls. "Where is he now?" I asked. My son's eyes flicked to the darkest corner of the room. "Listening," he whispered. After that conversation, I found myself unable to move freely inside my own home. Every hallway felt narrower, every room quieter, as if something was drawing the sound out of the air. Shadows stretched in ways they shouldn't when the lights were dim. My own reflection looked wrong. Maybe just fatigue, maybe something else, but I swear it blinked a fraction too late once, like it was trying to keep up with me. Nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed with the lights off, and the silence would grow so thick it felt like someone else was breathing in the room. Not loud, not close, just there. My son slept curled in a corner beside his bed, refusing blankets, insisting corners were safer. I started leaving lights on, not because I was scared of the dark, but because I was scared of what existed comfortably inside it. Sometimes I'd wake to the sound of tiny tapping on the walls, a slow, deliberate pattern like someone counting. And whenever I asked my son if he heard it too, he'd nod silently and say, "That means he's practicing." One evening I tried something different. I placed a small audio recorder in my son's room while he slept, hoping to catch any unusual sounds. I didn't expect much, maybe footsteps, maybe murmuring. But what I found was far worse. The recording started normally, quiet breathing, occasional shifting. Then around 2:37 a.m., everything changed. My son suddenly sat up. Though I couldn't see it, I could only hear the fabric rustling, the sharp inhale. Then a second sound followed, a low hum, steady and uncertain, like someone trying to imitate human speech but failing to shape the words. The hum grew louder, closer to the microphone, until it crackled with distortion. My son whispered, "Not tonight. He's awake." And then, silence. Not normal silence, but an abrupt, unnatural cut, as if someone had pressed their hand over the microphone. The file ended right there. No footsteps, no breathing, no clicks, just an empty void. When I played it back a second time, the hum felt even closer, more aware. I shut off the recorder and locked it away, terrified of listening again. Something had tried to speak, and it was learning. By this point, I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. Children don't craft fear this intricate. They don't memorize rules created by their imagination. They don't whisper threats they don't understand. Something was happening to my son, something psychological yet disturbingly consistent, as if his mind wasn't inventing a monster but responding to one. I began monitoring him more intensely, taking notes, observing every change, the shrinking pupil response, the way he flinched at certain corners of the house, how he avoided walking past walls at night. He started placing objects on the floor, small toys, marbles, crayons, in patterns that seemed random until I noticed they formed barriers, like protective rings. When I asked about them, he said, "He hates stepping on things children love. It keeps him away for a little while." My heart clenched. "What does he want?" He hesitated, tracing a circle on the floor. "Not me," he said softly. "I'm too easy to scare. He wants someone harder." His eyes met mine with heartbreaking clarity. "He wants you," and for the first time, I believed him without question. The final warning came on a night colder than any before. I woke suddenly, sensing movement, not sound, not touch, just a shift in the room's presence. My son stood beside my bed, shaking. "You have to get up," he whispered urgently. "He's not hiding anymore." I followed him into the hallway, every instinct screaming to turn back, but his trembling hand pulled me forward. The air felt electric, vibrating faintly like something enormous was breathing through the walls. We stopped near the living room. "Don't look directly," he warned, pointing to the darkest corner. "He likes when adults look. It makes him stronger." I stared at the floor, terrified to raise my eyes. I could feel something there, tall, patient, aware of every breath I took. The temperature dropped so sharply my skin stung. My son squeezed my hand. "He chose you," he whispered, "because you didn't believe at first." A low, distorted exhale filled the room, closer than anything should ever be. And in that moment I realized the truth. Whatever had been haunting my child had only been practicing. I was the real lesson.